Episode 32, Jakob Benschold from Sweden, Swedish national team compound member. It's a little different than normal, but he's playing with some Barebow, kind of some training, some fun, some lighter side of Instagram, and you're going to learn all about that journey right here in episode 132. Well, welcome back to the Barebow Project. John, it's good to see you. We are here with a special guest, use words, Frank. A guest from across the pond here a little bit. It, it was sort of a kind of a joke. Saw some stuff on Instagram, then realized, oh, like okay, we're not this isn't just some random person wanting to play the Barebow game. So we're here with Swedish national team member, um, 900 club from JVD Open, World Championship gold medalist for field and 3D, right? Is that right?
So
Or
field team.
field, that's right. It was just field. But you were 3D,
We
you
just
were
went
3D
over
team
this.
member.
We literally
Shut
just
up,
went over this.
John. Shut up, you old timer. And
Oh.
current national record holder. Um, Sir, would you please introduce yourself because the way that we got to having this podcast is kind of entertaining. So let's get into it.
Yes, my name is Jakob Benschold. As aforementioned, a member of the Swedish national team in compound. And so I've been a national team member since 2022 in the field and target team. And I've also done one trip with the 3D team.
Nice. And somehow, some way, so we have one of the top compound shooters in Sweden, and he posted a video on Instagram like, "Hey, if I get, I think it was 500 likes,
Yeah, I started out with
shoot bear."
500.
Yeah, started with 500. I'm gonna go shoot barebow. So you're a current pro staff shooter for PSE archery. I'm assuming Easton and Ramrod
That's
as
correct.
well, maybe a few
Yes.
others. So it is rare, but it does happen that we get a lot of higher end compound shooters that openly come out and are like, "Oh, I want to try barebow," you know. So you posted a post on Instagram, and I think it came across my feed, and I commented on it, or somebody tagged me. I don't remember. I was like, "Yes, get after it." Whatever the response, I thought was awesome, and then a light bulb went on. I was like, "This could be a fun conversation because you're younger, and it's fun, and it would be cool to kind of get some feedback of like, your comparison, blah blah blah." And you're like, "Good." And I was like, and I asked you about John, if you ever talked to John. Like, yeah, only in comments. And it was probably a joke knowing this guy, but long story short, you're like, "Good," because I have some questions. I was like, that's a perfect segue as the reason to have the podcast then, because you are a professional shooter for what it's worth, and um a world class shooter. So it's cool to kind of take a world class shooter in John Demmer. I am not classic myself in that category by any means. But and putting, and just bringing that together and seeing how, not only are we, there's some good growth there for all parties involved, in multiple ways. So welcome to the Barebow Project. You are officially the first compound shooter, I think, to be on the podcast. I've interviewed others on Peak Archery Project, but never on Barebow Project, so it's kind of cool that way. Um, so let's just kind of dive into it first of all. But let's talk about like what prompted you to put that post up. Like, was the interest already there prior? Was it someone in your DMs or in comments like, "Oh, do it with Barebow," like John just talked about a little bit ago before we started recording? Where did that come from?
I mean, looking at the comment sections from, my recent Facebook posts, particularly, since the JVD Open, you'd almost think that like someone egged me on to do this. But the truth is that from December until February, I kind of have my off season. So I don't need my compound shooting to be, absolutely on point. Uh, the important tournaments for me start coming in March. So I figured this could be little bit of a fun project. If enough people like go in and support it. So I thought, okay, I'll just put a post out there as kind of a feeler, and check the temperature, sort of. Is there any interest in this? And turns out there is. So I've done some other disciplines before. Like during the pandemic, we had split up nationals. So recurve would shoot one day, compound would shoot another day. And so I thought it'd be fun to shoot a recurve day and a compound day. So I did that for 1 year. But I have, to this day, despite my nationality, never shot a competition with barebow.
I like to he emphasized despite my nationality because definitely Sweden is sort of like big bear of barebow for sure. They definitely have some of the more solid shooters across the globe. But I digress. I know John. John, you play a little bit with compound in the off season too. A little bit indoor, mess around up
Yeah,
at
yeah,
you
a little bit more several years ago, but yeah, I still mess around with the compound boys.
not a lot, a couple times a year maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll shoot the indoor leagues, or the the indoor 3D or the paper with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I what bow and because it's a podcast and you should still do this for your sponsors, Jacob, just give a quick shout out. What compound are you shooting? What's your discipline there? What's your equipment? We can talk about all that and we'll get into the barebow stuff then too.
Okay, so a quick rundown is that I shoot a Dominator 40 from PSE, a Dominator X Duo 40, I should add, not the old Dominator. I shoot an Excel sight and scope, a true ball release, ramrod stabilizers, and Eastern arrows, fletched with, flex fletch vanes, biter nocks, all the works.
Nice. John, what compound were you shooting for indoor and 3D with us?
I used to shoot the old Matthews
Conquest.
C4.
Oh yeah, yeah. The
Right now the Concept X. Yeah.
Have that Hoyt Concept X. Okay, nice. I still haven't gotten a Concept X. I'm still have the Invicta 40, but one of these days I'll graduate with boys. So good deal. I guess then let's just talk about comparisons a little bit before we get into kind of some of the questions you had. What is one of the first things that you noticed when you picked up, or what direction, or who did you talk to, or where did you build your bow? What did you build your bow into? And as soon as you started shooting, let's get into like where's the comparisons? What was your first like, oh, this sucks, or oh, this is fun, but it still sucks kind of deal? What direction did that go? Jacob.
I mean, the biggest contrast is that in compound your progress is kind of linear and your performance is kind of even. Like if you are averaging 29 points per end, then you might be bouncing between a 285 and a 292, let's say, for an indoor round.
Mhm.
Whereas with barebow, I feel like I could shoot an average end of, let's say, 25 points, but some of my ends are like 29 points and some of my ends are 19. Like, it's very dependent on, factors that I haven't really had time to examine. Like, is my anchor point exactly where it should be? Is my tune where it should be? I really have no clue. My like most qualifying uh, factors coming into this is that I've shared a room with Ludwig and Leo, basically. And they've talked to me some about this. It just comes up in conversation, and I've picked up small things. Um, but a big comparison or like a contrast to compound also is like shot timing. Um, that is probably this point that I struggle with the most because without like any mental program or any, clicker per se, um, it's just so very different. I shoot a button with my compound, so that means that I just pull back, relax my fingers, I apply some pressure with my thumb, and then I start pulling. So as my palm extends, more and more pressure is put into the trigger, and that just makes it fire automatically. So I never have to think about releasing a string, or really don't have to think much about my anchor point either, because I have the peep sight, and that tells me if I'm in the correct place or not.
Yeah, it's that's a I think a common comparison between you said so you're shooting a thumb button, right? Do you
Yes, I'm
ever play
basically shooting
around?
at back tension though.
Yeah,
You're
back
shooting
tension
it
thumb
back.
button.
Uh, that I think that's a good John. John, do you want to kind of maybe bridge that gap between those two comparisons of the compound, a fixed draw length thumb button sort of back tension release method to the difference between the way that you have found success as a shooter shooting barebow and your experience doing both.
So yeah, I think that's for those that come from the compound side that try to get into barebow a little bit or dabbing in it or just just having fun with it. I think those that are dedicated punchers, like Tim Gillingham is a puncher. Those are the ones that I think transition a little bit easier because they have the mental engagement of, let's shoot this arrow now. Where I think that's where they transition to bare bow a little bit easier because there's no automatic like release the arrow, everything just is nice and soft. So I think that's what probably Jacob is going to have a harder time with is transitioning from the mentality of just pull, 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 and eventually it's going to go because it's not going to be the same with us. You do have to have a little bit of mental engagement of your timing.
Yeah. No, that's good. Um, I can definitely concur with that though, because well, not from a compound standpoint, I shoot a compound like you do. I never punch. I'll sit on that thing forever. That actually probably comes more from Olympic recurve because when you're expanding through the clicker, like the goal is to have that sweet spot timing when you're shooting Olympic recurve. And I did that for decades, really. So, or I should say a decade and a half roughly. So like that was more natural, and then that transfers well to like shooting back tension, or I shoot like a resistance release with my compound and for hunting as well. All right, good. I think that's a good way to kind of set the tone for what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Jacob, you had some questions, things that you sent us in chat. So let's just get into it and let's talk through some of those questions.
Yes, and I'm thinking let's start on the topic of like execution. Um, so how do you teach someone the kind of shot control that you would need for like a punchier style of shooting, or in this case, a style of shooting where you don't have a command from the bow or the release that makes you fire? Because the recurve transition was quite easy because the clicker tells me when to let go, and so I just do. It's like it's just kind of built in. So how would you teach someone like a mental program of when to fire?
Good, John. You can go first.
All right. So, the way I would teach people is like you have the same mindset of like you have to get the arrow on the point, you have to aim, and that's when like when you're shooting your compound, when you're establishing that aim, you're not actually pulling through the target. You're not pulling through your shot yet. Same thing with the Olympic recurve. You establish aim and then you start pulling and doing your routine. So the same thing works for like the command shooters. You don't actually start engage. You don't mentally engage of. You don't get into that position of all right. I can fire whenever I want to. You don't get to that point yet until you establish aim, settle on the aim, and like enjoy the aim for whatever brief period of time if you're comfortable with 1 second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds, because you don't want to become a slave of uh point of aim trigger shooting, because that's what's going to lead you into panic and develop your shot faster and faster until the point where you're going to have a very, very big situation on your hand trying to fix it if you want to fix it. Then you have to like break down that whole notion of point of aim shooting. That's how like I try to talk people into you have to. I've been saying it for like 10 plus years. You have to be able to get the aim on enjoy the aim before you can move on to your next step. And my next step is command shooting, in a way that I meant. And I say command shooting is like I don't like get it on point and be like, all right, now boom. Like it's like, all right, I can get it there, aim. I'm watching the aim, sitting there floating. I'm like, all right, I'm comfortable shooting whenever I want to now. And it doesn't even matter. Just like when you're pulling through on your compound, it doesn't matter if the arrow or the point just dips out and then comes back in. You're still going to be pulling for the most part. You might slow down your pull a little bit or pause it for a brief moment, and then it starts gliding in, and then you start engaging again. I know some people shoot that way, but maybe not everybody. But that point coming out of the center X for you is not like a detriment to your shot because it's going to naturally want to come back. And that's how I engage my shot is like when I establish the aim, I'm like, all right, I can shoot whenever I want to now. And if it goes, if you give yourself up to full control, or you give your full control up to your shot, just like they do with like in Winning in Mind, where the sniper always said that he believes he can curve the bullet back to his target, even if he pulls the trigger and it's off whatever a foot. He believes he can pull it back in, and it's the same concept of it doesn't matter to me if the arrow breaks in the eight. If I give myself up, my body will naturally want to do its thing to get it back into the middle. And a
Mm.
lot of times, where my arrow breaks in the nine, if I'm giving myself up, a lot of those nines are still just they're solid tens because my body will naturally want to make that small, minute, quick adjustment and put it back in.
Yeah.
So the important thing is when I do that command style shooting, I'm not like it doesn't have to be dead center. In an ideal world, I would love it to be, but I'm getting older, so it's not going to happen as often as it used to. But the idea is whenever it's even if it's outside the 10, still just you have to concentrate on making that good shot and still be ready and not have any hesitation. The problems usually come in when there is a hesitation, and then you see um, those famous yips from a lot of finger shooters because you do see it once in a while in the compound side where they give up for that brief moment and they think the bow's ready to fire, the trigger's ready to fire, but it actually doesn't because they're not quite there yet and they have that little yip. We do the same thing. The key is to not give in to that because that's when usually disaster happens.
Yeah, sometimes even after that yip and barebow, after like you can stay at full draw and you're engaged then because you reminded yourself, hey, I'm don't let go. And then you're like, okay, I'm good, and it goes back to the middle like real easy. But just to go back to the original question and from because my coaching brain goes on pretty often when on posts and stuff, I will say that if if one of the things that I started doing as a coach and as a shooter is I compartmentalize the shot process, especially with barebow, and work on those individual components. There's some people out there that think that that's doesn't carry over. I disagree because if you become more comfortable with the hold and practice the hold exactly how you want it to happen during the shot, you practice the release and learn to duplicate the exact same release in training and drills as you want in the shot, and you work on that bow arm and the follow through, which we've had discussions in the past, like especially like just amongst our group of friends or whatever or online, like a really solid bow arm will save a not great shot sometimes. And that's kind of what the the reference of that is similar to what like John was talking about, like not like of giving yourself up in a way, like you're just committed to the shot. You're not trying to control what's happening downrange. You're just committed to what's gonna happen, what's supposed to happen naturally of sorts. Maybe it's my explanation of it or my understanding of it, but I'm a big fan of shooting drills. I'm a huge fan of practicing until you can't get it wrong and trying to, and what happens is as you get better at those that compartmentalized portions of the shot process mentally, physically, the whole thing, they will come together. But you have to do them all. And I guess where some of the criticism does come from it is like people don't want to put that time in. There's like it does take time. Like you're not going to get a fix like that. Um, And a lot of times the fixes that you do use that have maybe a quicker impact, they just don't last as long. But um, so I don't know. Does that answer your questions per se for that one?
Partially, yeah. I so when I'm shooting my compound, I have a pretty rigid dialogue in my head. It's the same every time. I walk up and I'm basically telling myself, be determined, be strong, be decisive. And then as I anchor, I kind of do the shot IQ program of like, here we go, and then pull, 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 pull until the shot goes. So is there a dialogue that like that I could use for Barebow, do you think?
I'll start on this one just because maybe it's a little bit similar, but when I've done my best shooting, the only thing I remind myself of at full draw is, or before I even draw back, is about being relaxed, not and clearing my mind of anything else I might be thinking of, and telling myself to hold. Put it in the middle. I might be mentally or physically thinking of myself about holding. Just hold, stay. I think the word I use is stay because it's a one syllable repeatable thought. Stay, 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 and then it goes when it goes. So try not to. That's probably my the better version of myself as a shooter when I was really shooting a lot and practicing. Definitely had the best carryover, but
Mhm.
volume and drills also played a bigger part in that, and that's always been my downfall is time. But John, how about you? You definitely have the longest running, really like success rate in barebow, at least on the American side. How do you translate into that conversation?
Yeah, I really don't have a mental dialogue with myself. It's more confidence, trying to build the confidence. There is something to like trying to like self inner promote yourself, if I'm using that vocabulary kind of correctly. But trying to build up your internal confidence. Um, so like for me, it's like I almost like turn it into like an aiming game, and I want to see how tight I can get it. And then usually if I can do that, my confidence it builds up, and it's like it almost develops into like I can't miss, or like this was pretty easy. So for me, it's always trying to build my internal confidence up that it's almost too easy. And you're gonna get what you're gonna get in the end anyway. If you shoot an eight, yeah, whatever. We're all gonna shoot eights. It's not that big of a deal. But for me, there's really no like linear dialogue for me because for me, I always want to be on my toes. I think Dave said this once. He's always trying to think of three, four shots ahead. So like he can almost imagine a problem coming up in a couple shots because maybe he did two things in a row and maybe something changed in the process. Like it's getting a little too fast. So like the next time he's thinking shots ahead to prevent that from happening. And so I kind of do the same thing where I don't always have the same thing going forward. Um, I try to be more adaptive. So like if I notice my shots are getting faster and like, or like if I was talking to myself, I don't want my timing to be the same every time because then you become a slave to the timing. And then that could lead to bad habits of, all right, well, maybe you're not quite ready, but time's up. We got to go. And that can get that kind of stuff can lead to punchiness. But as long as like my main core is get it on aim, and after I establish aim, okay, I'm ready. It might only be a second. I might only be aiming for a second, but if I get it to a second, it's like boom, and it's there and it doesn't move. All right, I'm safe to move. But where I say I'm always on my toes, where if I feel like it's probably getting a little quicker or whatever, okay, then now I will mentally engage myself. I'm like, all right, I have to hold this a little bit longer, because I don't want to become a slave to that pattern because if I do, then I'm going to be giving up some things and timing will probably break down eventually and just lead to a lot of bad shots. So, yeah, I don't really have that particular thought process going through, but I do have it in a way where I establish aim and say, okay, we're good to go from here, and then that's when I move on to my next shot or the next cycle of the shot.
That kind of there's some advocacy in the Barebow world for using clickers as trainers. And I think John's explanation here is kind of like a perfect explanation of why that could backfire. I'm not saying it's going to. Maybe some people it'll work. I think my approach to that is listen, you do you until it doesn't work anymore. Then you got to try something else. Or you just take the advice you were given originally. But like that's one of the major downfalls to or you've shot Olympic recurve, so like you become very dependent on it. And when people aim too hard in Olympic recurve, they can't get through the clicker. Instead of just trusting, like just expand. The shot timing is a little bit easier to keep that sweet spot on the timing with Olympic recurve, but you're oftentimes shooting higher poundage, longer distances, blah blah blah. But you have stabilizers and all the other stuff to make that easier.
Well,
Um,
yeah, the stabilizer, and you have the like almost like perfect proper form where you're at full strength.
and you're a
Like
low
the-
ranker.
if you're
Yep.
if you're down here, you're going to be at your full strength, but you can't anchor there. So, but Olympics here, it's not that far away from being at full potential. But we're up here a little bit higher, and now like our strength wise, like we're never going to be in that strongest holding position. So, like all that kind of leads to potential issues, and then and, like we can work around most of that,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's why it's a little bit harder sometimes to get off the fingers. One of the reasons.
Yeah. Good.
Mhm.
All right. What's
Yeah, I
next?
guess
Let's dive
that
in.
answered two questions in one, because my next one was basically my introduction to like the Barebow group was posing a question of, what kind of clickers are people using? Like, are they using fingernails? Are they using mental triggers like a program, like
Oh,
Shot
yeah.
IQ, basically? And you two were very adamant that I don't.
I
That
would
I
I wouldn't
stick
say
to.
I wouldn't say adamant don't. You got to do what works for you. I do see like some people, and I do run into these people on several occasions. Those that like seem to struggle, I've seen it in the past where like they're shooting like 530s, which is good. I mean, it's not top tier stuff, but it's pretty good. It gets you in the upper, whatever 20%. It's going to get you there. But then they think, for the most part, they think, all right, I got to find a quick fix to get to the next level because I'm already here. Like there's no reason why I'm not shooting better. And well, usually the problem is like everybody has their full like everybody has a certain potential. Like you might not be whatever 540 shooter, 550 shooter. You might be a 530 shooter, and that's your home zone. But meant like we as humans, we always think we're better than we are. Sometimes it's true, but most of the time it's not true. We are what we are. Um, we're all not like 6'6" with a 48-inch vertical. We're not all Michael Jordan, we're Manute Bol, like we're just tall and we can't jump, but we still can be the best at what we do. So like people always think that this is the reason why pyramid schemes are so successful is because we always think there's more. And even though sometimes it doesn't make sense, we still fall for it because it sounds so good. It's got to be true. And then you'll run into a couple of people that it works really good. And they're like, all right, well, now this is definitely the way. But for me, like a lot of people that I run into, they hit some certain levels and then they break right off. And like I ran into a personal friend that we used to go back and forth all the time when we were coming up, and we got up to the point where we're shooting 550s off the shelf fairly regularly. Like it's not that uncommon. We're shooting 550s every other week off the shelf. Um, and then all of a sudden he just completely fell off. He's back down to 440s and was shooting 520 plus average the year before, and then the next year is up to like upper 530s. Um, but his problem, like he's like, all right, well, he's like, well, what are you doing that I'm doing wrong? I'm like, well, I'm actually like, I'm mentally involved in my shot. I don't give up. I don't back down from like anything. Like I'm shooting with extreme confidence. Even if I'm not shooting great, I'm shooting with extreme confidence. I think that helps the most. But he ran into grips here, and boom, his scores went right back up. But the problem was he stopped focusing on all the negative and started back into the confidence of like, oh, this is going to give me confidence. Like I'm going to shoot awesome with that. So he completely forgot everything that he was messing up and went to it. But the problem for him was 2 weeks later, he's right back down to 400. Like it was even worse because the problems he had prior to trying the grips here, like he didn't want to address any of those at all. And then it's like a new bow syndrome, right? You're not shooting great, but you think you should be shooting better. You grab a new bow, and all of a sudden, it's the best thing in the world. But the problem is now you're focused so intently on just enjoying the shot, you're forgetting all the little things that you're messing up with the old bow. And then 3 weeks later, your new bow is your old bow. And then you grab your old bow, and then it shoots better again. 2 weeks later, you're back down to where you were because you lost all your you lost what you were doing and you're focusing on the wrong things. And that's usually what happens when I run into people that try sears for the most part. Uh, I often describe them as band-aids because they're a quick fix. But if you're bleeding, no band-aid is going to fix the bleeding forever. You're going to have to fix what the main core issue is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And that's so true for every discipline as well.
Yeah.
Like not just Barebow. This is universal.
I think that's where
Yeah.
you have to be careful too, online. And this isn't necessarily directed at you, just people that might watch the podcast. I mean, you have to be careful. It's crazy because when we started this thing, like there was no information available. Like I think it was like 2018 where the discussion came up. And now everybody's got an opinion on everything, and there's a lot of information out there.
Mm,
John's current that explanation, I nobody can touch that. That was the perfect verbiage to explain that what your question was, that post on the Barebow group. And if anybody ever asks a question about a sear or a clicker or that like that verbiage right there was absolutely perfect. Nothing else can be added to it or taken away from it to make it better. It was
Now, I would say the people that do shoot sears or whatnot successfully, those are the people that fix their problems in the beginning,
oh,
and they're not necessarily, I would say, running it to shoot high scores. They're just running it because that's what they do. But those are the people that did fix what was causing their problems in the first place, or they're just maintaining it and staying on top of it so it doesn't eat away at their shot too much.
yeah, I mean, we might joke around with some of our friends like closely about shooting. Like there's banter with us always. But let's let the record be very clear. We're not telling you don't do it unless it doesn't work for you. Then go back to the drawing board and fix the original issues, right? Like that's
Yeah.
that's the let's go back and do that. But like there's proof without a doubt that people can shoot sears and shoot them well, and nobody is ever going to take that away. Results are data. Data is the only thing that you can call fact. Whatever it is, whether it's wins, whether it's records, whether it's, you know, whatever, you got to go with that as like that's the determining factor. And I think that there's something to be said for that across all boards. But yeah, anyways, I digress. That was the perfect explanation and a perfect follow-up. So I think that answered that question 150%. Anything else on that one, or you want to move on?
no, I'm very satisfied with that answer. So I guess we'll move on to a more technical question or like technique-wise question. Because I'm having a little bit of an issue finding an anchor point that I like. So I wanted to ask you, like, which facial features or which references do you think are solid enough, accurate enough to base an anchor point on?
I will tell you, I did not listen to John for like the first 2 years nearly well enough. I will admit that. I was insistent on just being corner of my mouth. It was just
Mhm.
too cushy and too. I shot well, but it just wasn't consistent enough. just from that aspect. And I ended up settling on my lower eye tooth is where I ended up settling for both indoor and outdoor. That's because I cater my tunes specifically so I can keep a similar anchor for all disciplines. Um, because I'm
Mhm.
not good enough at changing my anchor point like he is, because he can change the anchor point on a dime and be just as good, if not better. Um, he's better at it than, well, mostly anyone. But like, so with that being said, I will say he is definitely the one to kind of maybe give his feedback on how he learned where his most consistent place is and whatnot. So John, take that one away, please.
So it's always like if you have a distinguishable feature on your face and it's in a comfortable position, that's what I would use. I use I used to use this my index finger and I put it like so you have your gum line, right? And then you have your tooth that comes down your eye tooth, right? And so I used to put it like right in there'd be like a little triangle between my eye tooth and the next tooth behind. And I would put this finger right in it and it would not move. I might have like a millimeter of play, but I can superly distinctly feel that thing. It started hurting me a little bit for shooting 50 meters because I couldn't quite get 50 meters. I get about 45 with a pretty fast setup, so I actually ended up dropping down to underneath the tooth. So now I try to put the corner of my nail like right here, right on the tooth. So like this part of my finger is never going to change. So I try to put that on the corner and keep my fingers nice and tucked. But I also I also use a string blur so that gives me like a secondary reference. This is a primary. The string blur, what helps the string blur is keeping your head position left and right from turning. If you keep the string blur the same all the time, you're anchoring the same all the time, you're going to have roughly the same thing as what your peep sight is doing. The only problem is you still can do this. You can still lean it forward and backwards, still get same anchor, still get the same blur. So that's the only other feature that you're gonna have to like kind of pay attention to. Um, but that's how I do it. When I shot a lot of trad stuff when we were not allowed to string walk. I shoot like 30 yards for 3D was our max. Well, technically 33 because they gave you 10%.
Mm.
I actually used middle finger and I put that middle finger on top of the tooth up here. And that would get me a point on it right at 30 with a fast setup. And with a slower setup, it'd give me point on at 20. Um, but that's where I found because like I mean it's all about like trying to maximize the game that you play. I always thought the closer you can get that arrow to your eye and less crawl, the better, as long as your form is very, very strong and repeatable. Um, I find the form down here very strong and repeatable. So I might potentially give up some variances on crawl, like when a crawl gets this big with a little bit of head tilt, it's gonna move it a little bit more downrange. Um, but it's super strong. If I went back to just shooting longbow and trying to get high scores with longbow and 20 yards, I'd go right back up here. But it would take a good solid month of dedication to try to like perfect that again.
Mm. Yeah, I tried that once. I got a trad bow for fun. Thought I'd shoot it for like a 30 arrow competition. I could not gap shoot to save my life. Like my mind just wants to go back to middle. So I ended up taking my compound arrows, 2315s, with 200 grain points. So the arrow is, bordering on 600 grains. And I shot them out of a club recurve, so a wooden bow, 20 pounds, for 18-meter target. And that then I could aim like low yellow.
Yeah.
Funny. We've done crazy stuff like that for sure. It's funny though.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. And I know you had a string blur question, and that kind of is a good segue to that question, if you don't mind, if we kind of just jump right into the.
Yeah, absolutely. So for recurve, I used to align my string blur to the inside edge of the riser. And that worked good for me because I anchored like on the outs, or I put my nose on the string with like the
Mhm.
right corner of my nose touching. So my question is basically like, should I adjust my string blur to where I want to hit left or right, or is there like a best place to put it?
Go ahead, John.
So I think that well, the nice thing about the Olympic recurve, it's almost very, very cookie cutter. Even though it's not, it's probably the closest you can get with finger shooting, because
Mm,
everybody anchors almost the same exact spot. They usually have this string right here, right on your jaw. It's usually
yeah.
like somewhere right here, and so the string is going to be right here. It's almost all the same. But for
Mm,
barebow, I think it's for me anyway. It's a more stronger position to be in. If I'm back here. Obviously, that string is a little bit further back on the face, like than Olympic recurve. So it's going to be back here. So the string blur is going to be away from the inside of the riser. It's going to be more middle riser, edge of the riser, or maybe sometimes if people will anchor back here, it might even be the end of the plunger. I've had it where I've shot into the plunger for field worlds before and had no problem. I find it to be just a lot easier. Just find your anchor point and see what that strongest holding position is. And I don't have a lot of dexterity in my neck. So it's, I might have sometimes that my face will be turned just a little bit, but if that's my strongest holding position and I'm not wailing the crap out of my face, then we're good to go. And that the string blur might be right edge of the riser. For me right now, it's right edge of the riser, or like right on the maybe outside nut of the button.
Yeah, same. Not the same location. It's never been for me. It's always been either end of the plunger to middle of the plunger. I've never had string blur any closer than like middle to quarter of a plunger, depending on the size of the plunger, obviously. Um, but I think that's early on. I didn't look at string blur at all, and I think it was well.
Grace and I
You
hounded on
know,
you for
hold
years.
on, don't go there. One of the reasons I didn't, and I still shot well. I mean, I was like 520s, 530s indoor, was because what John just said. Like, if you're really good at head placement and your head doesn't move, and you're consistent with it, you can get away with not doing it unknowingly. But the further I got into barebow, the less repeatable I was with that because of all of, I mean, I don't know why. Maybe discipline changes, maybe just lack of discipline on my own shooting form, and I started paying attention to it. But I will say that one of the reasons I started paying attention to it more is one, it allows you to recognize when random left and rights come that you don't know why they're happening because everything
mm,
feels good. Number one. Number two, Grayson, if you go back through some of the podcasts where Grayson Partlow was on with me or with me and John, um, Grayson sort of uses the string blur as part of his checklist, like your internal mental verbiage. Like he doesn't
mm,
allow himself to move. And Grayson's one of, if Grayson was able to put full time into archery, like he would without a doubt be on Team USA and one of the top barebow shooters in the world. He's just that mentally disciplined. It's incredible. And like, but he uses the string blur as kind of like a step in the process or a checkpoint that he'll kind of aim before it, but he doesn't really focus on aim until this is done, this is done, this is done, this is done, and then until he kind of gives himself that moment where, okay, like John said earlier, you can let go at any time now. I'll let go when I'm ready. And then he's like, okay, I'm ready. Thank you so much for listening to this first half of the episode 132 with Jacob Benschold. Visit www.thebarebowproject.com for the full video version for our subscribers or the free audio version of the full podcast. Thank you so much. Good luck this indoor season. And don't forget, check out our online store, the other options and things that are available at our website.